All right, I know we're starting just a couple of minutes after the hour, so I think that we can probably go right ahead and jump in. But thank you all so much again for joining us today. And we're here to talk about a topic that I think has been on a lot of our minds recently, and that's what should nonprofits be doing about email? If you're here, I probably don't have to tell you that for many organizations, email has been experiencing some stagnation and even some declines. And today we're going to talk about that and also talk about some strategies for addressing it. We're going to pause for questions throughout. We'll also save some time at the end. You can submit yours through the Q&A tool down at the bottom of your screen. And just for your awareness, we're also recording here and we'll send this out afterwards so that folks have it. All right. And before we dive in, we're just going to do some quick intros. My name is Duncan Stewart, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a senior vice president at Mission Wired, and I work primarily with our nonprofit partners, building and optimizing their digital programs. And I work with organizations like AmeriCares and No Kid Hungry. And I'm based in New York, and I can pass it over to Khadijah.
Hi everyone, I'm Khadijah Naeem. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an associate vice president at Mission Wired. I work across our political and nonprofit programs, and I also help on our growth and acquisition teams, primarily helping folks join the digital co-op. So we'll talk a little bit about that in here as well.
All right, awesome. Well, let's jump in. Okay, so we're going to kick off today by orienting ourselves in the data, talking about some takeaways from end of year. And then we're going to move into some best use cases for email and how you can put those strategies into place in 2025. And then again, save a little bit of time for questions. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I'm going to kick us off by talking about end of year. So 2024, definitely a challenging year. And end of year, I think we could all say had its ups and downs. Giving Tuesday in December, something we're going to be facing for a while longer, and definitely saw a lot of shifts around where the weekend fell. With that said, overall, our partners did see growth both in revenue and gifts, which was fantastic. However, we did see a decline in the number of donors across channels. That's a stat I'm going to come back to because we do think that there are some ripple effects there that are affecting the email trends that we're going to talk through. All right, and now into our reason for being here, and that's email. One thing that I want to say about this trend as we're all here to talk through it and talk through what organizations we're seeing is this definitely wasn't true for everyone. I'm sure that some of you on here saw growth. I'm sure that some of you on here saw results that looked about the same as you've seen in years past. But we wanted to highlight four large nonprofit partners who, while they saw either growth or steadiness across channels year over year, saw declines in their email fundraising. We're going to dive more into ways that they address this decline soon, but it definitely was something that we were seeing, fairly consistently, and something that we were getting asked a lot from our partners, from others in the industry. How should we be thinking about email, knowing that it hasn't seen this consistent growth that we'd seen in most years up until now? And one thing that I think kind of helps us dig into this trend is thinking about volume. One thing that we saw that was really interesting was that for the first time since we've tracked email volume at end of year, and that's back to 2019, it didn't increase. I think we can all say, at least anecdotally, that we've only seen email volume go up, up, up each year. But while inboxes definitely still felt crowded, I can speak for myself there. I felt like I was getting about 5,000 emails a second. We'd attribute that stagnation in volume to that lower revenue over email. Many organizations were deciding not to do the types of resends, lift notes, refreshes that they might have done otherwise because email wasn't performing the same. There's definitely some trade-offs there. Did organizations also raise less because they were sending less? But across our partners, we were thinking and trying to make some very strategic and quick shifts to make sure that we were prioritizing the channels that were doing best. Khadijah's going to talk in a little bit about, the importance of not just sending more to send more. And she's also going to talk about the fact that this was true for email volume, but not for SMS. Certainly, we're going to be thinking and are talking a lot about the differences between those two channels, where we're seeing growth and how, while SMS volume is increasing, we're also seeing revenue really skyrocket there. All right. And then on that cliffhanger, I want to circle back to the fewer donors note for my first slide. So one thing that we saw during end of year was that average gift increased substantially from last year, and that's both across November and December and during that final stretch period. This aligns with the Fundraising Effectiveness Project's findings on donor consolidation through 2024. So fewer donors giving more. There's been a lot of challenges in growing and retaining donor audiences that we think are really key to the email question. Donors are giving more. That's awesome. We want to keep them moving up, but it definitely presents a challenge and a challenge looking forward whenever we don't see those audiences increasing and new donors converting to cover that attrition and to cover those donors who are not retaining. This is something that's going to make smart segmentation and upgrades really, really important. And we're going to talk through a few strategies there. All right. And with that kind of backing the data and backing in what we've seen and kind of what brought us here to discuss this today, we wanted to talk specifically about email strengths. And one thing I want to say right now, and we're going to kind of echo throughout this, is while email saw challenges in 2024, email is not dead. You should still be sending emails. Like, we are very strong believers in using your email program. As you can see here, for one organization that we worked with, email revenue is still making up a really large percentage of their revenue. We do think that it is really, really important to continue sending. It's still the largest driver of digital revenue for many organizations. I'll pass it up to Katie to talk a little bit more about this and about some other ways that you can use email the most strategically.
Thanks, Duncan. So now that we've established that email is still one of the highest revenue generating channels for most nonprofits, we want to answer the question, what can we do to maximize our impact on email and stand out in inboxes? So a couple of the best use cases for email can be really honing in on your content, using eye-catching graphics, whether that's having a store of a digital library that your organization has access to, or licensing photos to have more compelling photos in your arsenal for your graphics. Long-form storytelling, really making that case of why should this donor make a gift to your organization through this email. So storytelling, using personal anecdotes, can be really compelling for making that case and driving it home. Personalization is also huge. I think with the immense volume of emails that folks are receiving in their inboxes, feeling like that email is for them, making sure that you're using their first name, or in a supporter record using their correct city and state, and just really small additions like that can really go the extra mile for creating a really compelling and successful email. And then Duncan will talk a little bit more on unique segmentation, a strategy that has really shaped email strategy in recent years, and also honing in on some of those more high value groups. As we've talked about, we are seeing fewer donors who are giving more to organizations as a whole. So really taking advantage and making sure that you're year over year and consistently focusing on lapsed donors, consecutive givers, and just renewals overall on email is really important. And then automations. There are a lot of CRMs that are creating really innovative ways to target your audiences automatically. So thinking about ways that you can set up an email automation and really just forget about it. So like new one-time donor journeys, and figuring out ways to really micro target and make the most out of your email program is really huge. I think a question that comes up really often is when email is down, shouldn't you just send more? Since email is a relatively less expensive channel compared to paid search, SMS, and the short answer is more is not more. So I think a trap that a lot of organizations can fall into is overcorrecting on volume. But we wanted to emphasize that every email is an opportunity for someone to opt out. And we want to make sure that instead of just ramping up volume to increase revenue results, we're making very intentional and strategic adjustments to the calendar and content that our audiences receive. So we can apply tactics like some of the ones I mentioned to really enhance the quality of our emails instead of just upping the quantity.
All right, Khadijah teed me up nicely for this one, but we also want to spend some time talking about segmentation. I can't really emphasize enough that if right now you're speaking to all of your audiences the same way, it is time to think about your segmentation. And what I think is going to be really important here, and something that is uniquely achievable on email is customizing your content and ask, especially in high response moments. So that can look like things like, speaking to your prospect specifically, asking them to make their first gift. That can mean speaking to your lapsed donors and referencing the date of their last gift and asking them to renew their support. That can also mean, and I think one of the most crucial ones, is including those extra notes of gratitude for your high value audiences. That can look like sustainers, that can look like mid level, that can look like just really loyal donors who you want to go to and say, you know what, you've been an incredible supporter. You've been such a generous supporter. Here's the impact of your giving. This doesn't mean that every single email needs 5 different versions, and this doesn't mean that it has to be this enormous lift. But doing a lot of testing and identifying those areas where it can make that big difference is going to be really crucial. I recommend, especially on a day like Giving Tuesday, you think about this as a way to stand out in inboxes and a way to, and Khadijah, you put it really well a few minutes ago. I'm going to try to echo what you said. Speak to folks where they're at, speak to their experience with you. I think it's also time to think about using email to build that pipeline into your high value audiences, into your mid level and sustainer. Like Khadijah mentioned a few minutes ago, one of the really great things about email is you have that ability to go long. You have that ability to say a lot. It's a really great place to present that case for giving to those folks who have shown that propensity towards those behaviors, whether that's making a sustaining gift, giving a DAF gift, becoming a mid level donor. And to the note earlier about more not being more, strong segmentation is also a really great way to keep your overall volume down, especially for your most important audiences. One thing I really encourage you to explore is testing a message with prospects before rolling it out to your active donors or your high value donors. You might set some benchmarks for success for yourself and say, we don't want to roll this out unless we see an X% response rate, and then be able to know what is going to perform best with those folks who have already made investments in your cause. So I would really encourage you to take that step back, think about your segmentation, and think about those audiences that you want to speak to really uniquely.
And while we are here to talk about how to really optimize your email program for campaigns like Giving Tuesday and end of year, I think it's really important to also maximize opportunities to drive urgency throughout the year. And rapid response, it's really dependent on the organization itself, but this can be a really critical way to drive revenue and grow your email program outside of those tentpole match campaigns that your organization has throughout the year, and of course at Giving Tuesday and end of year. So rapid response can mean so many things and can apply to so many different situations, but I think some of the most important things to know on rapid response is getting ahead of the curve, getting out the door quickly with your messaging in an emergency moment to stand out in inboxes, get your organization's name out there as fast as possible. Getting that quick deployment, immediate feedback, and then including really compelling images and details of the response. So again, this just really gives your audience another lens to understand what your organization does and how their contribution makes a direct impact in the work that you're doing. So of course, we can't plan for rapid response, but it's something where your organization can set up a toolkit for rapid response. That's something we do with a lot of our partners. And that's something that enables us to, as soon as those headlines break, we're able to get out the door with messaging and really take advantage of those moments. Another area to set yourself up for success going into Giving Tuesday and end of year is, of course, acquisition. And while you should be hopefully working on acquisition throughout the year through paid search, through fixed cost methods. We would definitely recommend making sure to strategically time those acquisition efforts as well, especially ahead of big moments like Giving Tuesday and end of year. So if you're not familiar, the Digital Co-op is the first of its kind acquisition tool that uses AI modeling capabilities to analyze your organization's email file and then churn out the best targets and leads that are most likely to convert to donors for your organization. So we work with over 200 members who are currently in the Digital Co-op with 130 unique email addresses. So we have basically an endless inventory that we're able to target for the organizations who are members of the digital co-op. And we just wanted to call out a few examples of successes, specifically for this past end of year season, where members of the digital co-op who invested last year saw paybacks as high as 235% by the end of the year. And also, a vast majority of the revenue that they received in those final campaigns of the year were generated from leads acquired from the digital co-op. So it was definitely a very useful tool for all of the members who participated. And if you have any questions about the digital co-op, we're going to leave our emails here at the end, and we're happy to talk to folks individually about that as well. Now, we're here primarily to discuss email and how to set yourself up for success going into this coming year, going into, again, like Duncan mentioned, Giving Tuesday and end of year falling in December again, as it will, I think, for next year as well. But we would be remiss if we didn't also talk about a hot new channel that is probably the biggest source of growth for nonprofits in the industry right now, and that is SMS. So at Mission Wired, our clients saw a 20% year-over-year increase in revenue raised via SMS this past year, as well as a 22% increase in volume. So like Duncan mentioned, dissimilar to email, we are actually seeing more success as organizations ramp up that SMS volume. And that's because SMS has virtually a 100% open rate. It is a channel where basically, if you have a valid cell phone number for someone, they are likely going to see your message. And it just gives you a much better opportunity to get your most compelling content in front of these key donors. And so there are a few types of SMS that your organization can try out. Peer-to-peer long code texting is a little bit of a more expensive channel for SMS, but it's also a channel that most folks tend to start out with because it doesn't require the explicit opt-in that a broadcast SMS program requires. So for peer-to-peer texting, you can take any phone number that you have on file and you're able to text them. Like I mentioned, it is a little bit more expensive. With broadcast SMS, you are assigned a unique 5-digit short code, and that is only available to text folks who have explicitly opted in. So we tend to recommend kind of marrying the two programs using peer-to-peer to build up that opted-in file. So hopefully folks, when they donate via peer-to-peer, can input their phone number and get opted into your broadcast, and they work really in tandem. And then there's also a third type of texting, which are through list rentals, where a third party, like the Digital Co-op, which has its arm called Mission SMS, is able to text completely cold leads via our inventory. And we recommend using list rentals in those rapid response or major giving moments like Giving Tuesday and end of year. So there's a lot of opportunities to be texting if you're not already. And if you are, there are probably even additional ways that you could be trying that you're not right now. So SMS is really that up and coming channel that is also probably slightly contributing to why email is declining, since folks are having an additional channel to give through. So we definitely recommend adding SMS into your program if you haven't already. And then finally, on SMS, we did want to just provide a small case study for Mission SMS. One organization was able to use Mission SMS in a rapid response humanitarian moment last year, and they were able to convert 350 new donors and generate an immediate return of 150% return on investment just from a fairly small buy in Mission SMS. So it really does end up competing with a lot of those paid media options like search and direct to donate on social. So definitely an interesting additional tool to have in your toolkit.
All right. And we're going to leave you with a checklist to use ahead of your next big email campaign. One thing I'll say is like, this trend may not be easy to reverse, but it's definitely not time to give up on email yet. It's just time to get more strategic with how you use it and to explore these new ways to engage your audience. We think that 2025 is a really crucial year to think about revamping your strategy, doing a ton of testing, and letting go of assumptions that you might have about email, how it works, how you should be messaging folks. That's going to mean that what you're going to go into December with a tried and true plan under your belt so that you're still making the most of this crucial channel. All right. And thank you all so much again. I can say that email is one of my favorite topics and really appreciate you listening to us talk a little bit about it. Really hope this was helpful and informative, and we're eager to chat more with you about any challenges you're facing and how we might be able to help. We saved a little bit of time for questions and we're watching the chat and can dive in. And I think that there's a couple in here now. Okay, so this first one is, what do you recommend to do to improve engagement and retention over email? That is a fantastic question. We talked a fair amount about fundraising here. I think just coming out of end of year and knowing that that's a big priority for a lot of organizations, but you definitely cannot do fundraising without engagement. It's really crucial to find that right balance for your organization so that what you are sending is not just ask after ask, but that you're also offering your audience ways to engage with you and ways to learn about the difference that their gift has already made and why they're being going to be asked potentially to give again. What we encourage is finding a really nice balance there and doing a lot of testing. For some organizations, you might really lean into like long form emails, cultivation messages, things that are going to feel more like impact reports, more personal stories. If you have access to a tool, we have one at Mission Wired called Sign for Good, where we can host surveys, user journeys, quizzes, things that can get folks to, click out of the email and engage with you deeper and actually take that action. So I'd recommend a lot of testing there and thinking very strategically about where you fit in those cultivation moments. For example, ahead of a campaign, or right afterwards with a thank you message, something to make sure that you're kind of balancing that and priming them for giving.
I'd also say on retention, a huge component that comes into play is segmentation. So, like we talked about, really segmenting your list via your higher value audience groups and making sure that, for example, you're not sending every single email or fundraising ask to your sustainers or high level donors, and really making sure that certain types of emails are only going to certain groups at certain times can also really help with retention and making sure that folks don't unsubscribe when just from an over inundation of messages.
Okay. And I see one. What kind of testing do you recommend to improve email performance? That is a really fantastic question. I'd say that that's going to really pertain to what your goals are. What I might say is, start small. Think about every element of your email that is going to drive someone to action and do some testing on it. Subject line testing, like that's kind of, lowest bar, really simple, but it's important to figure out what's going to get someone to open an email, especially as, the email providers are kind of changing things up a little bit as we move into this world where there are, AI summaries of what's in an email. It's going to be really important to test things like your subject lines, your preview text to kind of figure out that balance, how you continue to get folks opening. Within the email itself, we recommend, doing a lot of testing around the language you're using on ask. Is your audience more receptive to a very direct ask that's maybe more like deadline and urgency driven? Or do they want to hear a little bit more about the impact of a gift? I want to hear some more emotional language. That might differ too between different audiences, but we'd recommend starting with, looking at every element that makes up your email and diving into testing and then thinking about how you can iterate on that. Something that I'd like to do is to like literally diagram it out, point out everywhere that someone could click, everything that we think is going to drive someone's interest, even something that feels really standard like an email header, and figure out if there's another way that you could frame that so that your ask, the need, the impact is coming through even more directly. And then track your results really closely. See what's making a difference, see what's not, and make sure that you're doing a regular review of those testing results so that you can see those long-term trends. Khadija, anything that you would add on that one?
No, I think you covered that perfectly. I do see a question on our email list is small, maybe 1,000 people. Is that too small of a list to start? And I would absolutely say that is not too small to start. There is really no place that is too small to start. I would definitely encourage, like Duncan said, a lot of testing to really understand what that file responds well to. Additionally, I think you have a lot of opportunity to invest in acquisition to grow your file. There's a lot of time between now and Giving Tuesday and end of year, and even starting with a list size of 1,000 people, you really have so many opportunities throughout the year to grow your file and gear up for those big moments.
Okay, so a few more questions in here. Okay, I love this question about what we're gonna do this year that you've never done before. This year's gonna be a challenge. I'll be honest, and I don't know that I can say exactly what we're going to do, but I think two things that I'd kind of point to that we're really leaning in on. I know we've used the word test 1,000 times, and I'm just going to continue to do it, but I think that this is a year to get really structured and formalized with testing with that deep focus on email. We're revisiting some things that we've assumed in the past have worked, some tactics that have performed super well with audiences in the past that just didn't seem to take off during end of year, and retesting them. I think that this is going to be a really important moment to revisit those assumptions, figure out what's working, figure out what's not. The other thing that I would say is revisiting segmentation in a big way. So really thinking about if you can and should be talking to those audiences very differently, and thinking about too if there are folks that you should take off your email list. As you think about reaching out more, as you think about also strengthening your open rates, making sure that you're sending really good signals to those email providers, I think it's a good moment too to consider if there are folks who are just not opening, not engaging, but giving elsewhere who you really shouldn't be targeting over email. The last thing that I'll say that we're, being really mindful of this year is that integration and integration with channels like SMS. Not all, but many folks on your list will probably be reached on both channels, and making sure that those two, especially, are really complementary of each other so that when that email goes out, when that SMS goes out, that's all going to make sense together, that you're following up with folks maybe who took an action over email with a thank you SMS, maybe vice versa. Again, that's going to take a lot of testing. That's going to want to be really custom for your organization. But I think that integration has become more important than ever, especially as you lean into what makes email uniquely successful. And as you think about using other channels in other ways. Okay, did you see a question on SMS? Do you want to jump in on there?
Yes, and I think this might be our last question before we're at time. So I see a question that says, do potential contacts need to opt in before they're sent an SMS? And that's a great question. For long code peer-to-peer SMS, someone does not need to be formally opted in. If you have their phone number, you are able to text them. Of course, if they opt out, then you are unable to message them again, and you should make sure to track your opt-outs closely to ensure you're not messaging anyone who does not want to receive a text. But if you are wanting to text via broadcast, which is a much cheaper form of texting, you do need someone to formally opt in, and that's a key component of what makes up a broadcast file. So, would definitely recommend talking to your vendor if you have any questions on the differences between long code and broadcast and list rentals. But the need of being opted in really varies by type of texting that you're using.
All right, fantastic. And I see one last question that just came in that I think we can address before we close, which is kind of the question we're all here for. Is it worth it to keep investing in email if it is declining? Overall, I would say yes. Email is still a really well performing channel for most organizations. Like, we are still seeing very strong return. I think that what is going to be really important, like we've said, is using it in the right moments, leaning into its unique strengths, and making sure that you are tracking your data really closely so that you can understand what is working, where you might pull back, and so that you're walking into either, your big giving moment into December, into that moment where you really need email to shine with tested and true strategies underneath you. All right, fantastic. Well, I realize that we've kept y'all just a little bit over today. I want to say a big thank you to everyone for joining. This has been really fantastic. We can't see your faces, but hope that everyone was enjoying and smiling along. Again, we'll follow up with a recording of this afterwards, and that is also going to contain our email addresses. So please reach out with additional questions. We're always happy and excited to talk through any of this and any ways that Mission Wired can help with your direct response program.